Okay, so I'm going to be trying something a little bit different this time, and today I'm going to be talking about The Triflers. It is a book, not a comic book, not a manga, but a book. All words, no pictures. Now, why the hell am I talking about this book that probably none of you have fucking heard of? Mostly because, actually entirely because of the author behind the book, Mumkey Jones. If that name sounds familiar, either you're already a fan of his, or maybe you've just heard me mention him before. I'm a big fan of his work. I think he's a really talented YouTuber. He's my favorite YouTuber, actually. And whenever he announced that he was writing a book, it really piqued my interest. I was like, yeah, I want to see what this motherfucker's gonna write for a novel. That really piqued my interest. I really wanted to see, what he could produce. And he seemed like it really seemed like something he was really passionate about. So I was just like, yeah, I want to support this person that I'm a huge fan of. So I made a point to buy a copy of this pretty much as soon as he announced that it was a thing that was for sale. And I started reading it, and I was really engaged, and then I put it down for like 2 months. But then I eventually got back to picking it back up when I finally had some free time and finished it up, and goddamn, this is something that I really think is worth talking about, and it's a damn shame that, he can't get this thing published, because this is a really good fucking read. So what the fuck is this book about? Well, the way it's kind of been marketed is as a book about a school shooting, and it's, told from 3 perspectives, like this jock, the shooter, and the shooter's best friend. And yes, it is about a shooting, but really it's about a hell of a lot more than that. And I would even argue that the shooter isn't even the main character. I'm gonna try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but I will just, whatever I need to talk about to kind of convey why I think this is such a good book and why it's something that's worth reading, I will have to get a little bit into that bullshit. So like I said, it's marketed as a book about a school shooting, but that isn't, like I said, entirely accurate. It is about these 3 kids, they're all part of the same friends group, and it is really about, the events leading up to the shooting and, what happens, but there's just so much more going on in this book, these characters, their lives, and it is a lot more than a book just about some guy's school shooting. It's about, the shooter's life, the things that got him to this point, the best friend character who is manipulating things a bit, and then, the jockey friend character who is also kind of wound up in this story. Now, the first thing that really caught my attention about this was the format in which it's written in. Like I said, it's about 3 different characters, and it's written from 3 different perspectives. And the way Mumkey chose to do this is basically through, the character's own writings. There's Mason Elliott, the jock character. He's a jock. He's got a bit of a bad family life, which is why he kind of hangs out with the outsider kids. And his entire story is told through journal entries. Then there's Mario Quintanilla. He is the shooter, and his story is told through a manifesto that he writes the night before the shooting. So he stays up all night writing this big manifesto, kind of explaining his life, what got him to this point, and blah blah blah. And then there's Don Brecken, the best friend of Mario, and also a friend of Mason as well. Like I said, they're all friends. And her entry is a letter to her mother. And basically just, trying to explain to her mother in full detail all the events that happened and, why, what got her to the place that she's at. And this is all written after the shooting had happened. This really isn't a spoiler because that's at the very beginning of the book, but, Dawn is, on the run after the shooting had happened. And, it's just this big letter to her mother, kind of filling in all the details so that way, supposedly, so her mother would know, all the events that happened from her daughter's perspective. And the format which Mumkey chose to write this book, I think, is absolutely fascinating. I'm already a sucker for this kind of like narrative device in literature. Like, my favorite novel of all time is Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that was also like written in the style of a series of journal entries that were compiled together. So like having that and then, like go into this, I was just like, yeah, like this right here was already my jam. Just like from the way Mumkey decided to tell this story. But it's actually, I would say, like an even more creative way than what Bram Stoker did in Dracula, because that was just like a series of journal entries that were all compiled together. This is a series of writings from the characters, but they're all written at different points in time. Like I said, Mason's is journal entries, so they're written like as they're happening. Like at the end of his day, he writes a journal entry. Mario is, his whole thing is written the day before the shooting. So, he has kind of this context and like he fills in things, like he talks about things that like haven't happened yet or whatever. And then Dawn is written like, after, the whole event goes down, and hers being written like the furthest in the timeline. Like, and because of, the situation, like, like how everything blows up, in the finale of the book and how things go, and she's writing all this stuff, to fill her mother in, her mother obviously already knows about certain details. So Dawn will just reference things, that haven't happened, like that we don't have context for yet. That Dawn hasn't, like, gone into the details with, or Mason hasn't, or, Mario hasn't. So, you don't really have, like, the full context. And again, I find that really interesting because, like, it's just kind of like dropping these little, like, little hints of things to come, and it really, like, got me invested and made me like, oh, like, I really want to see what the hell gets them to this point. And it's not even just with Dawn, like, even like Mason, whose chapters are written like as he's experiencing them. One of his chapters ends on this big, like, holy shit, what the fuck moment. Like, you have no, like he writes about this moment and you're going, whoa, 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 whoa. What the fuck got us to this point? So then, like, you're just waiting for the next character's chapter that's going to fill that in. And it's just like, okay, like he said, like, such and such happened with this character, and you're like, well, what what got them to that point? Because, last time in that character's chapter, you're just like, there was nothing to insinuate this at all, and it comes completely out of left field. And, that's kind of the genius of this book, is that, like, the little things that Mumkey will set up, like, like I said, like, that's that chapter of Mason's that just drops this what the fuck moment, and then you don't get a resolution until, like, 2 chapters later, and it's, like, deep into, like, 2 chapters later. And another thing that's really great about it is, because it's always jumping perspectives, it really kind of keeps you invested, just because, like, you'll read one chapter and you'll get really invested in a character's story. At least I did. And then that character's chapter would end, and I'm like, well, fuck, man, I don't want to read about Mason. Like, I want to fucking read about Mario. Mario had this really cool shit going on. I really want to go back to his story. But then I'd go and, like, read Mason's chapter. I'm like, oh, man, like I was really getting invested in Mason's story. But then, I'd, like, jump to Dawn. And, and then, like, if a character had, like, kind of like a weak chapter, because, every so often, there's like a couple of chapters I thought kind of ended on maybe like a weak note that didn't really make me want to keep moving forward in the story. But because it was going into another character's storyline, who I was super invested in last time I read their story, I was really looking forward to picking their story back up and seeing where that goes, seeing where that resolves, or, like, what builds off of, the last bit of information we had gotten from them. And like I said, it's written in a really creative, genius way, and yeah, it's really, really good shit. Now, for those who are familiar with Mumkey's work, you know him for, his kind of, dark sense of humor, I would imagine, and, his kind of edgy humor, and there really is not a lot in this book. Like, I was really expecting going into this to read a book that was going to be full of kind of really funny, witty, like edgelordy humor, and I didn't get any of. I mean, like there is some, but it's sprinkled so lightly and so far apart that I could never actually just call this book a comedy. Like, if anything, it's really just more. It's a character piece. It's a character piece about these three kind of disturbed individuals and just like the events that lead them to this big travesty. That is the crux of this story. Like, it's not the humor. It's not even really like the school shooting. It's the characters themselves and their narratives and just, you know, everything that they're doing and everything that they're going through. Now, obviously, I very highly recommend this book. If I didn't, I would not be making this goddamn video. The whole point of this video right now is to tell you that this is a really good goddamn book that people should be reading. Now, that recommendation does come with a really big caveat, because there are some very viscerally detailed and very unsettling moments in this book, and if you are squeamish, I can't in good faith recommend that you read it. In fact, Monkey put on the back of the book, this book is not for the faint of heart. And I was just like, what the fuck ever? I can, whatever, I like, you know, gory bullshit, what? No, he was not fucking around with that. Like, there are points in this book that are just kind of hard to just read through. Very specifically, there's a part in one of the earlier chapters where the kids are watching this torture video on the internet, and it is described in such visceral detail that it was unsettling. Like, it made me physically uncomfortable, it almost vomitous, and I had to like just like I was so uncomfortable after reading. I just had to just kind of, I was gonna put that down for a while and just all right, and kind of process that, you know, out of my system a bit. Now, I will say that the worst part, that probably is the worst part of the book. Now, there are other parts that are uncomfortable and really hit you at certain points. At least for me, it did. But I will say that that is probably the worst point in the whole book, where it was just the hardest to read, because I was really worried that that was going to be a continuous thing in the book, and it really isn't. I don't think the book really gets to that level of, again. But that also just might be because after reading it, I was so fucking desensitized that if anything else that visceral had come up, maybe I wasn't as uncomfortable. Now, torture isn't the only thing. Like, I would say the thing that hit me the hardest, there's a scene where Mario is telling a story about his childhood, and he does something really terrible to a friend of his, like a childhood friend of his, and that just made me sad. That was one of those, like never before in my life have I just wanted to just hug a fictional character and just be like, it's gonna be okay. Because, yeah, like, I've never had a piece of fiction affect me on that kind of emotional level, because it felt so real, it felt so goddamn human. And that is a real credit and a real testament to Monkey's talent as a writer to just craft these characters that just feel fully fleshed out and feel like real people, and he writes these scenarios that feel like real life scenarios. And yeah, it hit me on a really deep emotional level, and that was another situation where I went, okay, yeah, no, I'm done for today, I'll come back tomorrow. But, you know, getting through those really hard-hitting moments of the book, you know, it was definitely worth it, because where this book goes, it has a lot of twists in it, because you'd think, like, oh, well, it's a story about these fucking edgy kids, and it's about a school shooting, and you kind of think you know where it's gonna go. You even know about, like, you know, from the beginning of the book, you already know about some characters who are not going to be alive by the end of it. So you already have in your mind, like, alright, you pretty much, at least for me, like I said, like, I had a good idea of what I thought, like, this book was going to end up being, and where it was going to go. Like I said, I was expecting kind of this more of like a dark comedy and something a bit edgier, and I thought it was going to be more of a straightforward story, and it was going to be mostly about just this school shooting, and it wasn't really. It was about these characters and their lives, and like kind of, you know, the disturbed things that they do and the things that made them disturbed, and, you know, or maybe like the things that led to them doing certain things. And, there are so many moments in this book. Like, I could just keep on praising just little things that Mumkey does. Like, there are little things even, like, there's something that, like, one of the characters' siblings does. And I was just like, oh, that seems like some dumb thing a kid would do. Yeah, that's fine. But then, like, later on, it comes into play. It's like, oh no, like, there was actually a setup for that. Like, there was something that initiated that, and you find out about it later, and that really paints another character in a different light whenever you find that out about them. And, like, what caused that event to happen. The finale of this book, not gonna spoil it, but, the ending of this book, like, really just completely recontextualizes a lot of what you've read up until that point. It really makes you just kind of rethink the entire story that you've just gone through. It is a very well-crafted story. Like I said, highly recommended. If you're a fan of Mumkey Jones, I would definitely recommend just, picking up just to see what he's capable of as a writer. Also, you might notice a few excerpts from his videos in here. I think specifically, I noticed his tangent from the Traps video, and as well as his thing from his depression video. Like, a lot of bits from his depression video and his Traps video end up in this. And you would think, because, oh, well, it's Mumkey, he's putting things from his videos in this book, it's going to be funny. But because it's told from this kind of unironic perspective of a very disturbed individual, coming from that kind of human being as opposed to coming from Mumkey, it paints that kind of dialogue in a completely different light, and it is, like I said, it's unsettling. It is kind of disturbing. Like, I didn't find it funny at all when Mario was spouting these things, because he's saying it with 100% sincerity. Like, this is this man's worldview, and it's, yeah, like, it isn't funny. It's just, it's like I said, it's unsettling, if anything. And, like, it's kind of funny to see, like, how something like that could be completely recontextualized when put through a different filter. Like, exact same words said by a different character, and it just gives it, like, an entirely different meaning. Now, if I had any criticisms of this book, I would say it's kind of has to do with the fact that, like, how well it's written, because this is written by a bunch of kids, like a bunch of 15-year-olds, and one's like this kind of delusional Aspie, and like he's really like he's really well spoken and well written. Well, he's not really well spoken, but he has very minimal mistakes in his writing, and I really felt, because he was writing the whole thing in a single night, that he might I kind of wish that, like, as he, started becoming more tired, maybe he would make more grammatical errors. Maybe he did. Maybe I just wasn't noticing. But I feel like that would have been something that really would kind of sell me on the whole narrative of, oh, this is being written by a kid in one night. Because, like, have it start off, well written, and because the writing becomes more rambly as Mario goes on. Like, especially when he starts nearing the end, you tell he's more tired, and he's really fatigued, he's completely worn out. He even brings up in his writings how fucking tired he is. So I really wish I would have shown in his writing, just by giving him a few more typos. Maybe he, like, missed a word, or, like, repeated a word, or just little things like that to sell you on the fact that this is being written by a kid who's fucking exhausted and who's kind of got a screw loose. Also, like, Mason, like, his journal entries are also really well written. Like, Dawn having her bits really well written, I didn't have a problem with, because that's just the kind of character Dawn is. Dawn is ridiculously pretentious, ridiculously up her own ass, really wants people to think she's the smartest person on the planet. So, like she is the wokest 15-year-old. Like, she really wants people to buy into that image of herself. And so her being, like, super well written, almost no typos whatsoever, like, that makes sense. Like, the way she writes things in such detail, it kind of makes me question, like, why would she remember these things in such detail? But at the same time, she could just be completely full of shit. In fact, like, there's evidence in this book that maybe, she's, like, flanderizing some of her friends, and, she's kind of depicting them maybe not how they actually are, just to make herself seem smarter or whatever, because that's just the kind of character she is. You know, like maybe she isn't 100% like a reliable narrator. But yeah, that's like my biggest criticism. There aren't enough typos. Ooh, you know, but you know, beyond that, yeah, that one little fucking thing, that one little nitpicky bullshit thing I brought up, you know, this is a fantastic read. It was far more creative, far more engaging than anything I could have fucking expected. MUMKEY'S chops as a writer is just really goddamn impressive. And I really, really look forward to seeing what type of work he produces in the future. Because, like, if this is just this man's first book, he wrote this shit between the ages, I think, of 18 and 20. So, that's goddamn impressive. And the next book he puts out, he's already announced his next book. It's going to be, you know, in a completely different vein than this one. I'm really looking forward to that. Who knows, maybe I'll talk about that one too if enough people gave enough of a shit about this. But yeah, whatever. I'll put a link in the description to where you can buy this book. Like I said, totally worth the read. Also, subscribe to Monkey Jones if you haven't. Duh. Like, I don't fucking just, like, praise a person this much and be like, nah, don't subscribe to him. Nah, fuck that guy. No. Subscribe to Monkey Jones. Do it. Alright. So, yeah. That's all I had to say. Hope you guys check it out. Hopefully more than 5 people have clicked on this goddamn video. And until next time, Xeon out.